of course, the FA Cup third round draw was made earlier this week and the TV games have now been selected. Just to run you through them. Swindon, Manchester City, Millwall Palace, Hull, Everton, West Ham, Leeds, Nottingham Forest, Arsenal and Manchester United versus Aston Villa. There are, of course, a whole host of lower league clubs still in this competition, as well as non-league sides such as Chesterfield, Kidderminster, Yeovil and Boreham Wood. As you heard, I never mentioned any of those sides in the TV games. The question is, why aren't they being shown? Isn't that what the FA Cup is all about? Seeing the minnows take on their respective sides that they are facing. Now, I know there are some fixtures that might not look as exciting as others, but isn't that what this is all about? The magic of the Cup, Simon? Why would they have picked some of these fixtures and not, want to benefit the likes of Chesterfield and Yeovil, for example?
Twas it was always, because people are looking at the basis of what draws viewership. And of course, we look at the romantic aspects of the non-league sides and their participation in a cup, and we go back to the great days of when teams knocked out Leeds United in 1970, whatever it was, and so on and so forth. But commercially speaking, tragically, broadcasters that do govern the direction of travel from football, whether it be Sky in the Premier League or whether it be the terrestrial channels and Sky in the FA Cup, and they will go to a formulaic approach which will appear to patronise certain aspects of the pyramid but really look at what they think are the main draws. And that is an element of tragedy, but it's also an element of commercial reality about it. And the story of the FA Cup has lost its lustre as a matter of course, because the Premier League has become so dominant and so omnipotent as the Champions League and what happens in Europe. So it is important that the FA Cup retains some identity, but unfortunately, if you look at football outside the Premier League, and I often make this analogy, it's not the greatest of analogy, but it is relevant. If you look at the EFL's positioning when it does its broadcasting, it's got an old geezer with a rattle, whereas the Premier League's got bells and whistles and champagne and everything going on with it. And if you start showing lesser aspects of the FA Cup, whilst it goes to the tradition of the proposition, it then loses an audience which has the commercial aspects of broadcasting behind it. And there is the challenge that football has between how it's run and how idealistically we'd like it to be represented. I
suppose that's what I was going to go down. Surely, from an idealistic perspective, we would rather see non-league sides on the for money, if anything, because they will make more money out of that than the Premier League side. The Premier League sides don't need, £150,000?
I think the viewer wants to see an upset. So
exactly, I think the cup shocks.
But the broadcasters, of course, the earlier rounds have been on BBC and ITV. I've been following it. In fact, I did Stockport versus Bolton, which is a fantastic game. Stockport have been knocked out by Rotherham, so they've not progressed. But when you look at the fixtures, they've got to look at them and they think, well, is there really a mouth-watering fixture here? So if Yeovil had drawn Manchester United at home, for instance, I'm pretty certain that would have got featured. So it does come down to the broadcaster wanting something that's there for...
But in terms of a cup shock... Manchester United Villa, we're seeing that twice already.
I quite like the rattle, by the way.
West Ham Leeds.
I do. I like the traditions.
But it's not a very aspirational image, and I understand why you might like it. But if you're looking at trying to build a currency of aspiration, which is what the EFL lacks against the aspirational image of the Premier League, I've always found it quite diminishing. Yeah, I get the tradition, but we're trying to build up a league. Of course, last year you saw Tottenham draw Marine, so of course that game was covered. But the challenge is that they're only going maybe a bit of better distribution mechanism for the finances, because the Premier League's playing in FA Cup games that are televised really don't need the money. So maybe the Premier League clubs could have a magnanimous attitude and say, what we'll do is whatever facility fee we were given for that game in the draw that we've got, we'll put back into a pot. And
just for the non-league clubs, or
they can be distributed to the non-league clubs.
We've got Swindon, for instance, who have been on their buffers a little bit financially. Are we saying that Man City then should give the gate receipts?
We have seen gestures like that, haven't we? That's fair to say.
What is the cut, Simon, for the gate receipts for the FA Cup games?
It was 50-50. Each team gets 45% minus two expenses. So you've got 45% each team, 10% to expenses or to the league, and then you've got expenses off the top. So you split it that particular way. But, obviously from the commercial benefit of the game being away, non-league clubs would like to play away at the Etihad because there'll be 50, 60,000 fans in there. Their fans would like them to have them at home because they can have the atmosphere at home. And so everything is a commercial trade-off, isn't it? There's nothing like a replay because the replay generates revenue. No one really cares if they win because they can, because if a replay is more lucrative and they get beat, then by definition it makes sense to them. The tragedy is that whatever way we cut this, the FA Cup has lost in our minds, Martin, the generation that we come from. We look back into the 70s with Alan Sunderland scoring that wonderful goal against Manchester United, and we look at all the sides that have won the FA Cup, even if you go down to Southampton, against Man Utd in 76. But that has been diminished by the Premier League. So you need these big sides as an anchor for the sponsors to want to sponsor the FA Cup, and for the broadcasters to want to broadcast
when
it.
As an individual, accomplished and won that trophy and come into the game really because of the FA Cup, that sort of one game a season as it was back in the day. You'd watch the FA Cup and you'd watch it from start to finish with It's a Knockout and you name it all the way through the day, beautiful day. That's the reason I come into the game. So it doesn't lose its romance for me. And I feel when we're here, sometimes you hear the occasional Premier League player saying, well, I'm not really that interested in winning the FA Cup. They've lost something. Because if you go well in that cup, and you ask those Leicester players who won it last season how they feel, how Schmeichel feels when we roll out that save every year, year after year, they're great moments. So you want to take that opportunity. It'd be interesting if Boreham Wood get through against Wimbledon, then it'd be interesting to see if one of the really big giants have to go to Boreham Wood, and whether or not the TV channels will take that option. I'm pretty certain they would.
But this is it ultimately, and I understand where you're coming from.
Listen, by the way, I am an absolute stalwart for keeping the value of these cups, but the Premier League clubs have diminished it over the years by not wanting to play in it at times, by putting weakened sides into the fold. I'm a great believer in the League Cup because it's the EFL Cup that brings revenue in. The tragedy is every aspect of football is a trade-off against commerce. And whilst myself and Martin might be romantic about the FA Cup, 60% of players in this country don't come from this country anymore. So they're playing in a cup that, whilst they can remember or be told about it, it doesn't have the same engagement that we will have with it. And commercially, if it's so viable and so wonderful a tournament, why isn't it monetised better? The FA, that people are campaigning for to have more involvement in the running of football.
It's on joint terrestrial channels now, isn't it? ITV now, BBC, they wanted that.
Look at what the Premier League brings in. Look at what the Europa Leagues bring in, and look what the FA Cup pays people. So I'm sorry, the tragedy of it is that everything is driven by finances in football. Perhaps if the FA Cup was more lucrative and better sponsorship opportunities,
it won't disappear though. They won't be able to go. It's the oldest cup competition.
No, neither should it do.
So it shall remain.
Yeah, and so it should. Absolutely, so it should.
No, and I agree with you completely. It's just, I feel, when you look at some of the selections made for TV, as much as I understand that West Ham Leeds, historically, we know what these two have done, in years gone by.
Winners.
Exactly. Manchester United, Aston Villa, yes, okay.
No,
two interesting
okay.
sides.
We can see that
but
every
not
week
exactly.
in the Premier League.
That's my point. I would rather see a lower league club taking on a higher opposition, say at home, for example. And look, I'm only picking this one out because I'm a Brentford fan, but I'm not saying I want it on the telly. But even Port Vale Brentford has more chance of a shock, in this FA Cup third round than, West Ham against Leeds. There's no shock in that. Manchester United against Aston Villa, there's no shock in that. It's just one side guaranteeing a place in the fourth round.
Play?
Port Vale, for example.
That's maybe a tricky
one.
Away
Exactly. So that's
in
terms of... Oh, that's wrong. As I proudly wear my Brentford Christmas jumper. All right. Well, I think it was fair that we all agree that perhaps some of the TV selections aren't quite what we think should be about the magic of the... I said
okay.
Magic of the cup, Martin.
Okay.
I don't think some of these fixtures certainly portray that. Okay, this is talkSPORT.